pull up the agenda. I didn't type it up. I have to get to this one. What's this meeting?
Hey.
All right. Today's date. 9/12. Seems like we have a decent crowd. Were there any items that people wanted to talk about before?
Yes. So there is the telemetry.
You want to do a telemetry
performance
discussion? Okay.
And as part of that, I think we should definitely mention the StatC2 Prometheus work that you have done as an overall part of that.
Do you want to start talking about that?
Yeah. So as we can see from the last recorded meetings agenda, right, that lots of CPU is being spent on inside telemetry. We actually have one more detail of that also shows that a lot of CPU is being spent in scraping itself, and that's where the work has stopped. So I think now we at least have two more things to investigate, like why is so much CPU being spent on scraping? If we realize that is just the inherent cost of scrape, and that is the inherent cost of just serializing all that data, then I think we have to see what else we can do. However, we did have other charts previously that showed a lot of time spent before the Prometheus adapter. So those two things have to be reconciled. And then the other big part of overall telemetry CPU used to be the StatC2 Prometheus bridge, which now, so yeah, Doug, if you want to go through that.
Sure, yeah. So I sent out a doc on Envoy stats collection, which is listed below here. And sorry, it took me a second to get the agenda updated. On Monday, we're seeing a lot of CPU. I think it was 10% overall or something.
Yeah.
In StatC2 Prometheus, and there are all sorts of other problems. When we initially added the StatC2 Prometheus bridge, we weren't running in HA environments, and we were trying to use it just to get some stats about various Istio components from the proxies that sat in front of them. Obviously, Istio evolved since those early days, and we didn't really ever evolve the StatC2 Prometheus collector. But there are stats inside of the proxies that we think are valuable, in particular versions of LDS and CDS, so that we can track whether or not there's version skew within a mesh. I think was one of the prime motivating use cases. So the Envoy stats collection doc listed there has a proposal and some alternatives for how to maintain getting Envoy stats out of the envoys and make them usable for querying and monitoring and alerting. So there was an initial exploratory PR, which actually got merged quicker than I was expecting, that does this by adding annotations to all the pods at injection time. and configuring the Prometheus instance that we add in the add-on to drop some of the more high dimensionality metrics that come out of Envoys, so that we get a sort of targeted small set that's processable of stats from each proxy.
Yeah, and that largely solves some of this scalability problem. It does move the cost. It actually reallocates some of the cost, but it does so in a better way. Right? It actually distributes the cost rather than having this like one pod taking up everything. And it also adds filtering, like Doug said, so that you're not just scraping everything whole hog.
And it's more correct.
and it's also more correct.
So Doug, are these metrics you're talking about, are these the actual Envoy underscore time series in Prometheus, or are these also the Istio ones?
These are purely the Envoy underscore ones that show up in Prometheus.
Yep, okay.
So yeah, they're all the ones that from the cluster stats and everything like that was getting dumped was a problem. And so we're trying to filter out most of that, especially request response ones now, so that because it's covered by the Istio metrics.
Right, yep.
And because there's just tons of them. But we're particularly interested in monitoring things about Envoy itself that only Envoy knows. And so, yeah, like I said earlier, the pilot team was particularly interested in tracking versions across all proxies in the mesh. So that's what this is about. And also we want to get rid, part of it is just simplifying the deployments of Istio too, right? The stats aid to Prometheus was yet another thing that had to go somewhere. So it's nice to sort of remove that dependency from Istio in general. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't mentioned in that doc, but I'm working on something now that I should mention. The initial PR added annotations for scraping to all of the pods. And this works fine if you don't have if you're not trying to scrape any application metrics as well. But when you're trying to scrape application metrics and you're adding annotations to the pods, they'll conflict. So there's work that needs to happen, which I'm doing today, to stop relying on the annotations for the Envoy metrics and instead set up a better config for inside of Prometheus itself to find the Envoy stats port and grab the data that way. And so that way, applications that want to set up their own Prometheus annotation for a scrape point can. So that's something that's not in the doc that's worth mentioning here at least. And I think there's already one known use case where these are overlapped. There was a PR today about Jaeger tracing that adds annotations for scraping metrics off of the Jaeger application. So that will also run into this issue. So I'm trying to address that as quickly as I can. So with a PR hopefully out in the next day or two. So that's sort of my spiel there.
One.
Of process adapter?
Yeah.
Have you finished the telemetry perf part, or is there any?
I think, well, so Doug has two other docs that he wants to mention, but did you want to cover all that? Do you want to cover that first and then go to the out of process adapter stuff? Or?
Sure. The first one, the extensibility of attributes, there's not a lot to say there. We've been getting a lot of questions about how do you add attributes to the system? So I wrote a little one-pager sort of summarizing the two main ways that happens. One way is just through attribute producing adapters inside of Mixer. And there's no, that's like the simplest way to add information via attributes. But that doesn't cover any information that's not already coming from the proxy or can be derived completely sort of separately. If you want to capture information from the proxy and send it to Mixer via attributes, it's a more complex process where we need to agree on the dictionary for those attributes. We want to make that public, and we need to update the clients and everything to send that. So that document covers that, and I'm happy to take questions on that if anyone has any at the time, or we can add them to the doc. And maybe, I don't know, maybe at some point we just publish that on the website instead of as a doc.
Yeah, I think we should just have it on Istio.io saying this is how we extend attributes.
Okay. So yeah, please take a look and let us know if that makes sense. It wasn't meant to be super detailed, but just give a high level overview of how that works.
I thought we had the GitHub wiki for information like that, but I'm not sure.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's sort of overlapping.
Yeah.
Overlapping purposes there. Yeah, maybe we can discuss that in a PR if we transfer it over.
Right.
To see where that goes. And the final doc was sort of a proposal about monitoring out-of-process adapters now that we're moving stuff out of process. I don't think the approach is going to be to recommend putting proxies in front of these things, but they are going to be running as other workloads that are sort of managed by the operators for the cluster. So I was thinking that it might be nice to provide metrics that parallel the way other workloads have metrics generated for them in Istio. So you could see Istio request counts and response times separate from the way Mixer internally tracks dispatch metrics. So I put together a proposal for how we might, a couple of ways that might be accomplished. I don't have any strong feelings. I think one of the things that was important there was we can't necessarily assume that the adapters will be running in process or in mesh. They might be outside of external systems as part of, say, I don't know, let's say AWS decides that they want to expose an adapter interface. We can't rely on putting monitoring there that reports back to the cluster. So this will be purely, I think we want purely client-side based generation of these metrics. And then it's a question of how do we generate them? Do we hard code them in the code? So we generate identically matching the default install, but that potentially skews if operators decide they want a different format for their metrics. Do we use the Mixer report, but with special annotation saying, hey, don't report on these reports? How do we solve this sort of potential recursion there? So anyways, I sort of talk about this at a high level there. So for that, I'm actively seeking feedback and comments and alternative proposals. But I think we do want a way that monitor them that is distinct from just Mixer's internal monitoring. And although maybe people disagree on that point too, but that's sort of the position that I started with. So I don't know if there are comments, thoughts.
So I think that yeah, I completely agree that it has to be client driven, and I think it also has to be configurable, just like other things. So we'll have to consume some of our own configuration to produce the right metrics there.
Do we need to consume it? In other words, if we attach, so one of the proposals was you could attach a stats handler on the client side connection for gRPC, which could then get the data, generate attributes, and send it through report. And then Mixer there's not a second consumption of config, I guess.
Okay, so then they just become adapters, just becomes another report, right? Another Mixer to Mixer report.
But a special report, because it's going to say it came from Mixer.
Yeah.
Or at least that's one way I think we could do it. We could also have it report to a different Mixer, but then you get this weird.
So I think it will have to report to a different Mixer, because some of these are going to be policy adapters, right?
Right.
So policy
It
and
has to
telemetry,
report to
it
a
has to report to a
telemetry service,
service
yes.
anyway. So we can't assume that it's the thing itself.
Yeah. So then the question is like, what do you do with telemetry generated from Istio telemetry?
Telemetry generated from Istio telemetry, yeah. So that's where the consuming direct would be able to break the cycle, or having some sort of header would also, break the cycle.
So anyways, yeah, please take a look, provide feedback. It's one of the things I want to start work on at some point in the near future. And it's not the highest of priority, but I think it would be good to have as we move forward, full bore into the OOP world.
So on a related note, there is an OOP adapter actually. It's mislabeled here. Just gonna fix the name, but anyway, it's the authentication for out of process adapters, right? So that document is also linked from here. And again, please take a look, do comment. And one of the outstanding issues where we are seeking feedback is how many ways of how many authentication mechanisms do we have to support? And I think so right now we have it narrowed down to just API key and OAuth.
Yeah, Matthias, or a mesh.
Right. So in mesh MTLS, correct. And we had basic all at one point, which we have dropped now. So the question is, do we need to support API key, or can we also drop that? That's kind of one of the questions.
Can I ask a question to go back? Because I haven't
Sure.
looked at the doc. We dropped basic auth just because we didn't think anyone would use it, or it's not really.
So basic auth and API key are of a similar flavor.
Okay.
Right.
Just,
And then for machine to machine, API key is the more common way anyway, which is why API key is there. Now API key is less secure than OAuth, etc., which is why some people, including Martin, has expressed reservation about supporting API key at all. I do want, like, my preference is we should support API key simply because it's much simpler, and there is a precedent for such things supporting API key today. So that's where.
is the concern over key management, or?
Well, the concern is that like the revocation. So API key has unlimited lifetime.
Yeah.
Like, it's not truly unlimited, but yeah.
But based on survey, like all those service providers, the seems like API key is the primary authentication mechanism that they provide. So I don't know. Seems like API key is a feature authentication mechanism that Mixer should also.
And what if we were to do API key? And sorry, I haven't read the doc,
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
what is the mechanism for getting that config into Mixer?
Volume
Amounts of
Yeah.
secrets?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and someone has to do that though.
Right.
Yes. So.
That's a tiny bit ugly too.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Well, also is much cleaner because we don't need to model just config the authentication URL and client ID kind of screwed. Oh, but you still need to mount
No, you
kind of
still
screwed, right? Okay.
Correct. You always need to mount some secret. And the difference between API key and OAuth then becomes of, like whether things are rotated or not, whether the same thing is used again and again. So yes, API key is used again and again. Whereas in OAuth, you would get a token, it would be automatically refreshed, and all that will happen automatically, provided the other side also supports it.
And I assume Are we going to enforce that TLS is involved for all these communications?
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, so TLS is absolutely kind of must.
Right. Well, I'm just wondering what the like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So TLS is must. Within the mesh, you will support MTLS as well. And actually, the thing that ties that somewhat to the OOP adapter monitoring is we had something there about, again, breaking cycle, right? Breaking cycle inside the mesh. So if you put an adapter inside the mesh, yes, there is a chance that you can have cycles.
Yeah, if you have a sidecar,
If you have a sidecar
With your specially configured sidecar.
in front of that, yes, then you do need to break the cycle, and you alluded to that in breaking the cycle for collecting telemetry. So we just have to make sure that we are on the same page there.
Okay.
Peter, is there anything else that
No.
we draw attention to?
I have something else for all of process adapter, but
Yes.
just want to make sure we have finished all part, right? Is there anything else we want to bring up about ALF?
I think we should. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we tie the OOP monitoring and cycle detection and whatever.
Oh, in the same fashion.
With this,
Okay.
and make sure it's one and the same.
Okay. Yeah, have you gotten any feedback from vendors at all?
I don't think
So-
there's any feedback yet.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. 'Cause like you say, like your survey of, I would expect the token to be heavily used.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So actually,
Yeah.
yes, we didn't actually share it with the telemetry group yet. We just put it directly here. Right?
Yeah, so let's send
Yeah, that's why the doc is not shared.
Okay, that's why. So, well, now it's linked from here, but we will also send an email to the telemetry group to solicit feedback.
So about OOP adapter, about OOP adapters, first of all, are we planning to move all adapters to Istio country build repo, or is that the plan?
So, okay, so there is another issue which will turn into either a wiki entry or a doc, most likely a wiki entry, which will actually enumerate all this. I don't think we are going to move all the adapters to contrib.
Yes. So what's the criteria?
Yes. So,
Okay.
okay. So, what I think that the criteria should be is that if it is something that's well and truly vendor specific,
Yes.
it shouldn't be in Istio contrib.
Like Stack Driver.
Yeah. So Stack Driver should be in one of Google's repositories.
Okay.
And similarly, the adapters that we have already accepted because we didn't have out of process before, we would want to move them, or they should be hosted by the vendor.
Yes.
And we will have, we already have ways to include the documentation and have the documentation included on Istio.io. And then there are a few outstanding issues still about what about integration testing? Like, is there anything such as a certified adapter, and what does the certification process look like and all that? So those issues are still outstanding, and those all will be addressed in that entry. But at least from where I stand, vendor adapters should stay in vendor repos.
Okay.
And
sounds good.
if the vendor adapter introduces a template which they believe is generally useful, then they can always open a PR against Istio, and then it will go through the normal PR process to decide if it's a generally applicable template.
Okay.
So what does that mean for Istio contrib? Should we just kill that repo if we're never recommending things go there? I mean, it sort of doesn't really exist as it is today.
Correct. It doesn't really exist. So I think that potentially, right, something that's kind of semi-vendor, but still part of the standard Istio deployment. So for example, the Prometheus out-of-process adapter could potentially go there, but then it could also just go into Istio.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So maybe if everyone does fall behind this recommendation, and if that's actually
Yeah, I think there are two different criteria, like the decision to make it out of process versus in Istio is a technical decision, and the decision if it should be in contrib versus a vendor repo is a, is a decision based on the whether or not it's open source or whether or not it's specific to one particular vendor.
I mean, vendor by definition is specific to the vendor, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Which so I think that if the vendor adapter is specific to a vendor, it belongs in the vendor's repo, right? Not in Istio contrib. So then we are really looking for, is there anything that belongs in Istio contrib?
Yeah, I think that
does not belong in Istio.
Yeah, I think in a good future, we're going to have a lot of adapters for open source integrations that are not vendor specific, where it was things that we don't necessarily want to have them built in Istio.
Okay, so for example, what would that be?
I mean, things like FluentD, that's an open source project, but I don't know if it's a core Istio type thing. It's not configured in the default configuration.
Would Istio team produce it or FluentD team produce it?
Well, FluentD is open source. There's no team. It's a community. It's community produced by the Istio community.
So would the FluentD community produce it or Istio community produce it? I think that's.
I mean, where do you draw the line? But it's in a community effort.
Okay, so yeah, I guess that we need to discuss that further then.
Yeah.
So I think generally if we produce it, then it should be somewhere in the Istio org.
Yeah.
And if FluentD produces it, then it should be in their org.
Certainly, abstractly, it seems like a defensible position, right? If we produce it though on behalf of their org, like it's a tougher thing to convince them.
But I guess I just don't think there's an us versus them if it's an open source project. Like I don't think it's we producing it or them producing it, because there's no them. I mean, it's
no. I think there is us and them in terms of who is going to maintain it, who wants it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a different. Sorry, I think that's a different question. Is the standard of maintenance for things that go in Istio or things that go in Istio org, and if we have a quality bar that certain adapters are not meeting, if they're breaking and nobody's fixing them, then they can be placed on there should be a policy in place for placing that on a list for potentially being deprecated or putting in some sort of attic.
Okay, so we already actually have some precedent for this, right?
Okay.
At least 2 out of process adapters, which are for open source projects. And I requested them to, first of all, produce a gRPC adapter and then host it in their open source repo. And then they did do that.
Okay.
So
And that was
the Skywalker.
Skywalker.
And then there is like one other thing which we will update here. And I think that is very desirable because they are taking the ownership
Mhm.
and they are ensuring compatibility. So that's where only the second part comes in, which I mentioned, right? Like, is there a certification? Is there something that someone can run, and whether it's Istio hosted or someone else hosted, say, yeah, this works with this version of Istio, and we're good to go. So that part is missing.
Yeah.
But I think from a hosting standpoint, yeah, we would prefer that the endpoint vendor hosts it, unless it's something like Prometheus, which we decide is part of the Istio core, and then let's just so if we decide that Fluentty is so common in an Istio integration that we just want it, then we'll just make it a part of Istio.
I'm also in the process of publishing an adapter for VMware Wavefront.
Okay.
So it's going to be an out of process, out of tree adapter, which would be under the VMware organization.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep. So I think once I have that published, I'm going to add some documentation as to how to make an adapter out of tree, because right now I think the documentation only speaks about out of process adapters and not out of tree.
Yeah.
So,
okay, that's awesome, and Peter is also working on.
There's just several gaps that we need to fill
Yep.
To make out of tree OOP adapter easy to develop.
Yep.
And like tools for code generation, and yeah, I can do the documentation, or we can collaborate.
Yeah, so actually, if you guys can collaborate on that list, and in fact, better yet, open an issue that says whatever needs to be done, that would be perfect.
Yes, sounds good.
yep, sounds great.
Yeah, so I have already started some PRs to ship Linuxer generate code gen tools with C2 release, so that you can generate code in your own repo. So yeah, I will link those PRs.
Okay,
in
perfect.
the issue, and I will CC you on the issue. Yeah.
What kind of adapter is this?
It's going to be a metrics adapter. So
Okay.
yeah, basically similar to Prometheus, Vim has its own enterprise product called Wavefront.
Okay.
This adapter would basically publish metrics to Wavefront.
Okay. Perfect.
Cool. That's exciting. And,
Yeah.
and thanks for working through it in its early stages.
Cool.
So there's a topic I want to bring up is when can we say our process adapter is ready for like production use? I mean, scalability, like things like scalability.
So I think scalability testing for out of process has not, we haven't done it yet.
Yes.
So once we do that, I think we can say that it is ready, which is why we're still. However, right? So I would encourage these adapter authors, right? So for example, Wavefront and anyone else to actually do scalability testing and open issues wherever things are not working out, because we do want to reach production readiness by 1.1. That's the goal. It's not a promise yet,
okay,
but it's a goal. So or at least we should know clearly what those limits are.
Yes. So Mixer has a bunch of perf tests.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking into them and see whether they would help to
So I think so. Some of them would help, so there is the low level testing,
Mhm.
but we also need to do just system
Sure.
wide kind of scale testing to say,
Yeah.
okay, how does, so for example, an out of process Prometheus adapter would actually be quite easy to scale test with because everything else is set up for Prometheus anyway. So
Okay.
kind of see where that goes. But then some of it will also depend on how big the template is,
Yes.
what they're expecting from it, and that's where actually having other adapters that people have written tested for performance and scalability helps.
I had a question regarding the design of Mixer. So, in terms of scalability, are we planning to have smaller agents running alongside different pods rather than have one single mixer which is publishing metrics?
So mixer, even the one single mixer is logically single, right? Mixer already has a horizontal pod autoscaler,
Mhm.
which means there would be a number of mixers that are doing this anyway.
Yep. But
Now we have, so someone has already tested with one mixer per node, and that was similar to HPA. That was the general consensus. And yeah, so
my
I
question
think-
is,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
think that's what the question was.
so I'm saying, like, can we have agents that run very close to the proxy itself, rather than have mixer which is publishing metrics to the adapter or something?
So but by agent, do you mean to say that can you run your Wavefront adapter? Like, what are you calling an agent here? Are you
Okay,
calling the
so
adapter an agent or something else?
no, I'm saying, can we introduce a new component which is an agent that
Okay.
runs like a sidecar on the pods instead of having a single mixer which is running outside the pod? Yeah, because
So in theory, yes. So in theory, you can run mixer in every pod. I
Mhm.
think that's architecturally possible.
Mhm.
What's the use case? Like, why are you looking to do that, or why are you thinking about it?
just sort of to reduce the number of hops.
Reduce the number of
Like,
hops for telemetry.
yeah.
Why?
So
Okay.
no, I'm just thinking about the scalability in scalability's perspective. So if we can put the mixer agent pretty close to where the metrics are generated, then we don't have to go outside the pod, or mixer pod, and then like go from there. That was my idea. So nothing concrete, just a thought.
Yeah. So actually, we have several things which we have been thinking about, but specifically to your question, right? I think that saving hops for telemetry isn't normally a huge issue, right? So saving hops for policy sometimes, but it really depends on what the latencies are and what you're cutting out. So something in the same pod, right? The network cost of accessing another process in the same pod and another process on the same node isn't actually that different.
Okay.
So by moving it in the pod, you're not necessarily saving even that much latency. So which is why having one per even node and just horizontal pod autoscaler where it could be on your node or on some other node, there wasn't a huge difference, but
It's interesting though. I mean, if you maintain, I mean, So let's say you had Prometheus adapters, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're generating them per pod, instead of generating and storing all the data in the Prometheus adapter for the entire cluster or mesh, or your slice of the entire cluster or mesh on HPAs, right? And depending on, like, that might, we might scale to 5, but there might be 10,000 pods or something, right? So it's possible that we could overload or create a lot of burden. Whereas if you distributed it out to pods, so that's something I think we need to look at a little bit,
So
especially.
That looks more like sharding though, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, all of this is a way of distributing, right? So yes, you could think of it as sharding to each individual proxy.
Right, like the
ultimate sharding. Right?
Ultimate sharding, right? Either degenerate or ultimate. Yeah, whichever way you look at it, right?
But yeah, I think that is something, as we discuss mixer architectural evolution,
right?
This is something that we should call out. And has this discussion started in any real way?
No, I don't know. It hasn't.
I think there will be, I think once we get another release under our belts, probably there's going to start to be a lot of discussion about Mixer Next and what that architecture looks like. And I think some of your instincts there, we'll start to have to address things like that moving forward. Does that help, Vanil?
Yep. I think the point about having a individual individual mixer running on each node, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yep.
Are there any other questions or things from the community? We've sort of blown through a bunch of topics and things today. So we haven't really paused to take questions, but are there anything that anyone wants to talk about or raise issues or bring up?
Well, Doug, I was going to show you some of the work we did on the Kiali UI, and I wanted to get either feedback now or give you guys a chance to stew over it and tell us what you think later.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
we have like 15 minutes left, so yeah.
And if you also happen to have a live demo, you can just put a link, and we can also look at it later, whichever way.
Yeah, I'll have to see if we got one. I know we got some, but they may be internal to our corporate network. But I can take a look, see if we actually opened it.
Okay, I'll stop presenting and hand the baton or whatever over to you.
You tell me if you can see this.
Yep. We
got it.
Okay. So the question I wanted to bring up, or what I wanted to show, is how we're visualizing services, literal services, as opposed to apps or workloads. Because we just added something a day or two ago, and we think it's good, but you guys tell us. So right now I'm doing all book info for now, right? So, and I'm looking at an app view, and you could tell the difference between an app and a versioned app if I just show it to you.
Oh, nice.
Basically, the version, right? So the versioned app shows you the versions within the app reviews, but if I want to collapse those version boxes, I can do that. But what I want to point out is this down here. You see the triangle?
Yeah.
Okay, so that represents an actual service. These squares are actual, well, in this case, they're apps. We have another view, a workload view, where you'll see actual workloads and they're circles.
So in this view, product page and reviews are also services, right?
Yeah, well, let me keep going, and
Okay.
this will make more sense.
Okay.
These are workloads, or these are apps. I'm sorry, these are apps. But notice the services out here are all alone, and you don't see any services anywhere else, which is kind of weird, which is I think where you're coming from.
Yes.
The reason why you see this is because this edge has nowhere else to go. What this edge represents is, see that there's like a little icon here that this represents there's a destination rule here. This is actually, I'm injecting a fault here. So reviews sent a request to ratings, but it never made it to any workload because I injected a fault here. So it tried to go to the ratings service, but it never got to a ratings workload. It basically failed, right?
Okay.
So we had no way of visualizing this short of showing this service out here in no man's land, but you see no other services around here, right? Now, if I go to here, here's my versioned app, but notice there's services everywhere now.
Yeah.
But this is right. So we're injecting the actual service representation in this graph.
Yeah.
So hopefully it makes sense, but I want to point out now, here's the ratings service that we saw before, but notice now you can actually see the V2 went into ratings, and that was successful, and it made it over here to ratings V1. So this green line, sorry if it's like flashing, but here, I'll fix it. The green line saying, okay, so the V2 reviews, he made it. He sent to review service, and V1, you know, that was good. Here's where the fault injection lies here, and you can see, well, this green arrow, you actually can't see, but this is the arrow where this got rejected. That's what the red arrow is saying, right? So there's some faults here.
Okay.
Right? But the point is, I'm showing requests successful or failed going into the rating service. And then those at success, you can see them coming out and getting support and getting replied here. That's what the green edge here represents.
I like
And you
this
can
view
see
a lot.
the same thing.
Yeah.
You like this view a lot? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to some. So we thought this was good because mainly because of this, you know, how this ratings service, we needed to figure out how not to have that sitting out in no man's land. But you're also going to see, you know, these services everywhere else. We weren't sure, is this going to be too noisy with your triangles everywhere? Because, you know, you got your product page, your detail service, review service. So.
Yes, so I think I like this view for its accuracy, but I don't like this view for its noise.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm bringing up. Is it noisy, right? So, and this is exactly why we have, I mean, I don't know if you could see the, in the URL, we'll probably have some type of UI control where we can flip this, but right now it's just in the query param. Here you could say inject service nodes true. So that's why you see them here.
Okay.
With my other graph here, you're going to see I had it set to false, and that's why you don't see them everywhere else. You only see them here because if we don't have this, there's no way to know that you had a fault here, right?
Is there a way to flip it? And in other words, like if I wanted to just see service-to-service comms without the apps, is there a way to see that?
Well, that gets to the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
Because we sort of have it in that versioned app view you showed, right? You can sort of see how you might step through
right.
and collapse that stuff down.
Yes. Yes.
I know it's more difficult.
Yeah. No, this is, so you want to see like a service only graph, which is what we tried to show, right, very early on. And even the Prometheus metrics was trying to show it, but really under the covers, they weren't showing, like, it's the whole source service issue.
Right. No, I'm acknowledging that. I was thinking, like, when the comments about noise came up, I did, like, I'm looking at it, and I do see the product page, the reviews, the details, and the rating services all there with arrows between them. Now they're going through intermediate points. I was wondering if, like, one way of reducing noise could be to take that and then, like, just say, show me only
services.
But also on a related note, right? Intuitively, like what we're calling services, right? If you don't want to be precise, you just want to be intuitive, then the graph that you're asking for is actually the workload view, right?
Well, let me show you that. So here's the workload view.
Okay.
Right. And that's intuitively what we would think of as services view anyway, even though it's not precise.
I don't know if we have the same intuitions, but yeah, no, this covers, yeah.
Right. This covers.
This does address that.
Right.
Now, so this is the workload view. But let me go back to here. As to the noise problem, that's what we're trying to rectify, where we're now trying to implement what we're calling drill down views.
Oh, yes.
So if I were to double click here, that's going to zoom me in, right? So I'm basically just looking at this subset of the mesh, looking what's coming in and out of ratings. You can see that select. Now, obviously, there's nothing coming out of ratings if you know the book info demo, so you're not seeing anything to the right. But the point is, we can see just focusing just on what's this specific node and ignoring all the rest. And if we want to go back, then we're going to have some way of going back to the main graph view. We're not sure if that's the right way to do it, but that's what we're thinking to help reduce the noise level. Have an overall view, say, oh, look, here's some red here. Let me go drill down into the red, double click, and now I just look at just, you know, what I care about.
It's really useful, actually. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah.
That is super nice.
All right. Well, that's what I wanted to show. I'm glad we're getting at least some. Oh, that looks good. That's useful. That's what we're looking for.
Cesar, did you have a question, by the way? I saw a comment fly by on the screen.
Me? Oh.
Or Cesar? I didn't get to see what the question was. Oh,
I can read it.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so my question is just if you can flip, like, by selection to flip a service to an app. And I think that was the original question around that. Instead of flipping everything, like showing everything, can you just select one thing and then explode that thing and close that thing? Like select, like how the rendering of the charts is done.
What I showed was if I double click is what I was showing, that double clicking will zoom you in. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm asking the same chart, you know, like if it is possible, like if the information is there to render that and just explode service to app. I'm just trying to understand a little bit the background of what's happened there in the UI itself. Does it make sense?
I'm sorry, no.
No, okay, so go back to the one you're showing, the apps and I think that's...
So there's the app view.
Okay, and then you have one with the service, the one that has a bunch of triangles.
That would be the
Version app view?
The version app.
Yeah, the version one. Yeah, this one. So my question was around that the reviews thing. If you could just have a way to, this is a triangle, right? The reviews are a triangle that you explode and became just bunch of versions, correct? Or not?
Oh, I think
no.
we're missing the injected service view query per app here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that got reset.
Yeah, like that. So they just, you can explode or not that part, you know, just that part, not everything. That was my question. If you have the reviews, basically you're exploding in the version part, right? This could be selected or something. That was what I was trying to understand. If the information... Sorry?
Oh, I was just saying, I think I understand what you're asking. You're asking sort of what I was asking is like the reviews to ratings link, could we just collapse the middle bits?
Yep.
While maintaining this view?
Yes, I understand that. That will be something we can look into. Yes, I understand. We don't have that. We can look into something like that. You basically want a service view. You want a service view. You want to see, I just want to see my services. I don't care about the workloads, apps. I just want to see the services.
Yeah, my question is just that, like, you have a UI with that, like you have proper payload to show this thing. My question is if how you're handling this thing, is happening in the client side or in the server side? Like, is the information there, or you're just...
Okay, yeah, I got you. When I change the graph type, that's a server-side request, and we're generating the graph on the server side, and then we're returning it back, and we're populating the cytoscape graph with the proper data. So we are making some server-side requests. Now, if I do things like traffic animation.
Whoa.
This is client side.
Is that
Right, the speed,
real-time data?
speed. Yeah, well, this is data that we got from the server, and we're getting it from Prometheus. It's not real time.
Okay, yes, but
It is,
live data.
yeah, live data.
Nice.
This is live data, right? And the number of dots changes. You'll get more dots if your rate's higher. The speed of the dots is the, request per second kind of a thing. But the point is that we're animating this client side. Things like hiding the badges here, that's client side. Changing what the labels are would be, right, this is all client side. So there are some client side stuff. Sorry?
Is security the MTLS label, whether it says MTLS or not?
I didn't hear that, it's muffled.
There was a checkbox that said security.
Yes.
Is that for MTLS?
Yes. So if I had MTLS enabled, which I do not, you would see lock icons where the channels were secured.
Nice.
Okay,
and
so
you could change our layouts too. Here.
Cool. So the data is there in the UI. It's just like if someone gives you a gimmick of how to enable to collapse and open and close, that will work, right? Because you have the data to handle this thing already in the UI, right? It's just a behavior of transforming a triangle in a bunch of squares or going back from that, right?
Yeah. So underneath the covers, this is Cytoscape. Mm-hmm. So it's just a JSON.
Okay.
The data is just JSON.
Okay, that was okay. Cool.
Yep. And we're letting Cytoscape do the layouts. That's why you can see we have a couple plugins for the different layouts that we want.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you for the demo. I think we're catching up at the end of the time here. But yeah, thanks for showing us. We'd like to see the continued progress there. That's exciting.
Yeah, that is awesome. And like I said before, if you have or when you have one that's kind of live, it would be awesome if you can send out a link.
Yeah. Yes.
The one other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if Mandar is going to throttle me for mentioning this, is I think that he is committed to giving a Mixer deep dive or Mesh deep dive, maybe just Mixer deep dive at the next community meeting. So if you are interested or have things that you would like to see covered, maybe shoot him a note or just tune in and ask questions. Other than that, I think, yeah, cool. Other than that, I think it's time to adjourn. So thank you everyone for coming and listening, and please take a look at those docs and comment. It'd be very helpful.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.